I am retired from my days of being a concrete contractor, but I thought I'd make a video about concrete contracting and maybe some things that that concrete contractor wishes that you didn't know. And these, the nature of this video is I normally teach, desktop and concrete as a hobby, that kind of thing with this YouTube channel. But I do have a lot of experience with concrete contracting, and there are a number of things that you hear all the time. And I'm not saying it's always from unscrupulous individuals, but I'm just saying that these are anecdotal things that you hear a lot in the concrete contracting world, and so I just want to address them with this list here. This will probably help you if you're a homeowner or you're having some concrete contracting done. So the first thing on this list is going to be, you know how we put steel in concrete so that it has tensile strength in addition to the compressive strength that concrete has? Recently, you've seen the use of fibers, fiberglass or stranded glass fibers used in concrete, and sometimes misrepresented as a replacement for steel. That's the point of this first point. Fibers are not a replacement for steel. They're really not ever a replacement for steel, save for perhaps GFRC, glass fiber reinforced concrete, like ultra thin, basically more fiberglass than concrete. When you're talking about fibers being added into a concrete mix, that's not the same thing as GFRC. That's a very specialized thing. For every other application, driveways, sidewalks, all that kind of stuff, the addition of fibers is great to minimize hairline cracking, but it's considered a secondary form of reinforcement and not a replacement for steel within concrete. So if your concrete contractor is telling you, we don't need to use steel because we're just going to use fibers in the mix, then you tell them that fibers are not a replacement for steel. They are for secondary reinforcement only. Here's something else that a concrete contractor might not want you to know. How thick is the slab of concrete that you're getting? And we'll choose the most common number here, 4 inches thick. Is it actually 4 inches or is it 3.5 inches? Like, you could just go and look at the forms. If the forms are made of wood, is one of the forms a 2x4 just standing on edge? Because a 2x4 is actually only 3.5 inches thick. So if you can see that your slab is going to be the thickness of a 2x4, then that's a 3.5 inch thick slab, and that's not the same as a 4 inch thick slab. And that detail, like a half inch, does it really matter? 3.5 inch or 4? 100% it matters. If you're the person that's buying this concrete slab, you want the 4 inch thick slab for sure. Visually speaking, it's really easy to see because a lot of times 2x4s get used and they're 3.5 inches. So just at a glance, you can probably see without going outside and getting out the old tape measure and double checking their work. You can probably just see based on their formwork how thick the slab is going to end up being. In addition to knowing how thick the slab is going to be, what does that steel reinforcement look like? Because you know what you see all the time is the steel's just sitting flat on the ground, just right there on the gravel. And the problem is with this is, well, the reason why it's there is because the workers are going to have to walk across this as they're placing and finishing the cement, and if they're the concrete, and if the steel is raised up, then they're going to be bending it and bowing it, and it's hard to walk on. You're tripping and getting your toes caught. So they leave it flat, saying they'll float it up into the concrete as they're going, which is all well and good, but it's not as good as using proper chairs and spacers to raise that steel up into the middle of the concrete for proper encapsulation. For the steel to work, it's basically supposed to be in the middle. It's not supposed to be in the top, not supposed to be in the bottom. For most applications, that steel's supposed to be in the middle, and if it's just sitting flat on the gravel, it's not doing a thing for you. Let's talk about another really common problem. We'll call it a problem. So you've got the concrete done, and you're looking at it like it's finished. You could walk around on it, and there's something wrong. Something looks bad here, and there's a lot of things this could be. There could be a big ugly stain, or some sort of efflorescence bleed through, and that means like some scaling, white scale growth, or any sort of visual problem. Maybe it's blotchy. Maybe there's swirl marks, like anything that fits the description here. If the contractor tells you, just give that, some time. That's 3 months. 3 months from now, that's going to be a-okay. That is like the reason I'm making this video. That is not true. That is not true. And There's a very few number of cases where the hydration of the concrete is not happening evenly, and you'll get a little bit of a blotchy look to it. But most of the time, when you're dealing with a visual deficiency from efflorescence to blotchiness or anything else, it's not going to get better with time. It's going to look exactly like that, or potentially even worse. But you know what's going to be different is so much time has now passed that, I don't know, are you even going to chase down that contractor and have them come and look at this and fix it? Or maybe you'll just live with it. And that's what they're hoping for. Really, what they're saying to you here is the concrete's not going to be different at all, but maybe you'll just decide that this isn't a problem. Let's talk something technical for a second here. So, control joints. Those are the lines you put into the concrete to encourage the concrete to crack in the places that we want it to crack versus cracking in the places that we don't want it to crack. And if you're thinking, hey, wait, well, I don't want my concrete to crack at all, be aware all concrete is going to crack. That's just a fact. And it's a joke about concrete. The two things that you can be guaranteed about your concrete is nobody's going to steal it and it's going to crack. When you put control joints into concrete, the idea is that you make a weak area, a specific line, which is slightly less strong than all of the surrounding areas. And as a result, it should, in theory, crack in that area before it cracks somewhere else. So this control joint in particular, there's two ways that you can do it. One, it's basically wet troweled in. The concrete's not exactly a fluid, but it's not fully hard yet either. And the trowel joints are cut in. Like the day the concrete's placed and finished, those control joints are cut in. Or the next day, somebody comes back with a concrete saw, and they cut the joints in. When those joints are cut in, they should be approximately 25% the thickness of the slab. If you see somebody just running the slab all the way through with the saw to the full depth of the slab, that is definitely not how that's supposed to go. It's supposed to just be at the top. You know, if you've got a 4-inch thick slab, then the control joint should really only be 1 inch to a little bit more. 25% to 33% is the actual range. So 1 inch to maybe 1.5 inches should be the control joint depth on a 4-inch thick slab. And just be aware, as a sub note here, just because there's control joints installed does not mean the concrete will crack there. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen control joints and then a crack running horizontally right next to that or parallel next to the control joint, and that's where the concrete chose to crack. Sometimes that happens and there's just nothing you can do about it. That being said, if you waited until the third day before you came back and cut in the control joints, and by then there was already cracks here and there and everywhere, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of installing those to begin with. They have to be done on the day of or very soon after, before the concrete starts to shrink and absorb the force that this slab is going to be exposed to, because that's when the cracks happen. Here's one. This is a big one. Pooling water. So you got your slab done, driveway, sidewalk, pool deck, whatever the case is, and then it rained, and now you're out here looking at it, and there's pooling water, like maybe pooling water everywhere, or like maybe just one big area where there's very obviously a depression here and it's pooling water. So in terms of what to do, I have a whole video on that kind of unpacks that problem. But here's the bottom line that I want to say right here. That is a workmanship deficiency. There is no other excuse for having a low area where water pools. In the world of concrete workers, that should be considered like shameful. Their buddies back at the shop should give them a hard time for the crappy workmanship which they've doled out here. And so don't accept any, oh, the sun was in my eyes, the mix was dry, whatever. Then something should have been done the day of. You should never deliver concrete which pools water. It's just considered a deficiency, and it's kind of a whole problem to deal with. Just be aware. Don't let them pull the wool over your eyes. It's not going to look better in the future. It's going to look exactly like that or worse. It's going to stain. It's going to deteriorate faster than the surrounding areas, and visually it just looks terrible. It's a workmanship deficiency. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, please like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you're going to learn a ton about how to work with concrete.